with film and music. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for that. Thank you for doubling down on that. So please say where you're calling in from. I see another person from the last session. So this is our second session. The first one, just to do a quick recap, the first one was on just intro from a lawyer's perspective as to how to think about moving from to I can be an entrepreneur in the creative space. So we had that session with Bernice. Bernice is a lawyer in fashion, also supports the creative ecosystem as a whole, and startups. So she was just spot on, sharing with us tips, tricks, the sort of things we should think about as business owners, away from a self-employed creator. Right. So that session was good. This session, or this week is shifting our mindsets. So we've sort of split the classes into three. There's fashion, there's a fashion session, which is today with Rhoda. There's an animation session, which is tomorrow with Danny. And then the last one is on Thursday for visual arts and craft. We didn't want to merge this session for all the sectors because we wouldn't enjoy the nuances of details from each subsector, right, of each vertical, right? The way you approach fashion as a business is totally different from the way you approach it as a visual artist, right? And so that's why we split it across the 3 days. I'm hoping that the guys that have registered are able to join across all the 3 days and just soak in on all that happens across these 3 sectors. So as we keep going, let me just do Rhoda's introduction and then we can kick off. Rhoda, thank you for joining us. Good afternoon again.
Good afternoon.
Rhoda is a Pan-African culture practitioner dedicated to turning creative talents into commercial powerhouses. As the founder of Lhaude Africa, she has built a premier ecosystem that has empowered over 6,000 creatives across the continent to think beyond the sketchbook. With a specialized background in education and business management, Rhoda has personally equipped 2,000 plus fashion entrepreneurs with the tools to scale sustainably. So very apt for shifting your mindset too. Rhoda is spot on. A recognized voice in the industry, her work has caught the attention of global giants like the United Nations and the African Development Bank. She's recognized for her contributions. Rhoda was nominated for the Future Awards Africa Prize for Fashion and awarded the Future Forward Female 25 Under 25 Award. So star girl all through. She's passionate about empowering women and fostering a sustainable future for African fashion. And in my own head, right, please drum roll, yes, thank you, Dolapo. In my head, Rhoda is the queen of scaling businesses, is the queen of making you global, right? Taking your brand and taking you global. So she has a strong platform that she's building as well that helps to do this. So again, without further ado, I'll let Rhoda kick off and start the session. Thank you so much, Rhoda, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super delighted to be here. I just want to get some feelers that everyone can hear me clearly, can see me clearly. Okay, I can see some emojis. I love it. I'm really excited to go into today's session. I think that teaching is something that is quite exciting and enjoyable. So I'm going to share my screen now and we will get right into it. Okay. I hope everyone can see my screen. I'm no longer on the Zoom database, so I won't be able to confirm, but I believe everyone can see my screen. So today I am going to be taking us through this curriculum from artist to entrepreneur, and I really like this because I think this is a good place for me to even share a bit of my background. When I got coming into the creative industry or into the fashion industry was almost random. And one of the things that, like every other person at this time, this was maybe like 8 or 9 years ago. Actually, no, this is 2026. Wow. This was 11 years ago. And it was very random. It was just as random as, okay, go and learn tailoring. Oh, designing is not a bad thing. I didn't have an understanding of the industry or of business or of entrepreneurship. It was very much from a passion perspective as someone who has a bit of background in media, loved media. And of course, if you watched a lot of like TV and showbiz, you know that fashion and media go hand in hand. So it was very much from an artistic perspective, an artistic point of view. But over the years, as I started to build my career and build my business in the creative industry, there's a point you get to where you realize that if you're going to build anything and build it sustainably, you need to have a different, like there's a shift in your mindset that needs to happen. And I think for me, it had to happen at some point because I started wanting to be a designer, designing for a couple of years on a very small scale, and then pivoting into, again, styling, designing, all of that creative path. But really, when I fully came into the industry, I started to realize that, you know what, there's so much more to the fashion and the creative industry than just, you know, all the artistic or the creative part. There's an entire ecosystem, an entire structure that needs to become a backbone in your business or in your for your creativity, especially if your creativity is going to thrive. And I think that this is one of the biggest gaps that we've seen so far in the fashion industry and the creative industry in Nigeria and across the continent, which is that a lot of people are very stuck and very focused on the passion, the creativity, the artistic part, but we're not paying as much attention to every other thing that makes for the business to grow. So what then happens is that after a period of time, that creativity starts to get shrinked because the thing about entrepreneurship, business structure, business foundation is that it creates a framework for your creativity to thrive. You know, when you've moved from just thinking as an artist or a creative person to now seeing it as an enterprise, as a business that needs to run, and you're creating the structure that guides that business, it gives you more room to be creative over time. So yes, I think my bio has been read already, so I don't want to spend time on this. Talent is not a business model. And I can say this very proudly, very gladly, because this is, again, everything I'm running us through in today's session is not just head knowledge, it's lived experience, right? Is realizing that, you know what? Your talent is great, creativity is great, being an artist is great, being inspired is great, but it is not a business model, right? And you need to have a business model if your goal is sustainability, meaning if you're looking to continue to be in the creative industry, run your enterprise for a number of years, then you need to have a business model. You need to understand how business works, because being talented is not enough. So what I'm going to run us through in today's session is, again, breaking that romanticized thinking, which I think I'm doing already, which is that when we think about the fashion industry, a lot of times we think about the magazines, the runways, the beautiful outfits, all of those glamorous things, the lights, the models, the stage, and those things make up the fashion industry. But that is only a part of the fashion industry. There's an entire ecosystem, right, that runs the industry. So if your focus as an artist, as a creative person, as an entrepreneur, is only on the front facing one where it's just, you know, the things that look good, the things that look cute, I'm sorry to break it to you, but you're not going to be able to run that enterprise for a long time, right? Another thing I want to do in this session is establish the economic reality of fashion. Running a fashion business, a fashion enterprise, is not a walk in the park. Before I'd come on this call earlier today, I'd seen a post from a very popular fashion brand, that are broken out during COVID. I mean, the brand had existed before COVID, but during COVID, they had this big break and they became a global brand. And I've seen the post that they made that they were taking a pause. And I was just having a conversation with some members with my team about it, which is that, you know, the fashion industry is not the easiest, it's not the most straightforward. It requires a lot of flexibility. It requires a lot of, business adjustment. So one thing I want us to be able to leave today's session is really understanding the economic reality of being in the fashion industry, running a fashion business. And in fact, I think it applies to the creative industry in general, because there's even an ongoing discourse right now on Twitter around the music industry. It's a very dynamic industry. The creative industry is very, very dynamic, right? Yes. And as I was putting this together, I had some questions that I wanted to ask us. And actually, I would even like to just see some feedback, because when I take sessions, I like that they're a bit interactive, right? Why do you think talented designers remain small? Why do you think creative brands make less money? Because whether we like it or not, when it comes to the grand scheme of things, when we're doing the numbers, when it involves all industry, the fashion industry, the creative industry is still not one of the top 5 or top 8, when it comes to the numbers that are being churned out at the end of the year, right? So why are creative brands making less money? Why are talented designers remaining small? And for you, do you think that fashion is an art, a product, or a trade? So I'd like to actually see some responses and get some of our feedback before I continue. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can see the chats. Um, I'd like to get our thoughts. Okay, Ayango says, I think it's all of it. So which one? Is this the second question? You think that fashion is a product, is an art, is a trade? I'd like to see some more feedback from one or two more people. What do you think? Do you think that fashion is an art, is a trade, is a business? In fact, sometimes when I have like sessions and I ask people, I'm like, oh, why did you get into the fashion industry? A lot of people will say, I got into the fashion industry because, I had a passion, I wanted to tell stories. And I always ask that, did nobody get into the fashion industry to make money, right? Because the fashion industry is a business, it's a trade. Right. Thank you, Ayago. I can see your answer. It's a trade. It's more than just art. It's more than just a product. It's a trade. It's an enterprise. And this mindset is very, very important. I want everyone in today's session, everyone who's watching this or coming back to watch it, to have that mindset that, you know what, the fashion industry, my fashion business is not just it's not just art. It's not just creativity. It's not just passion. It's a business. It's a trade. It's a business. It's an enterprise. And it needs to make sense as a business, right? It needs to make sense as a business. Um, and when you start to see it as a business and a trade, not just your art, not just your creativity, not just an expression, it starts to guide how you think about your business. All of a sudden, you're thinking about, how am I making money from this business? How am I making consistent revenue? How am I managing my cash flow? What is the sustainability of this thing? In fact, a lot of times I find that a lot of people, come into the fashion industry from the place of like passion. I love it, I'm passionate about it, but over time they fall out. And that's what happens when when you don't recognize it as a business. There's something about seeing your fashion business or your creative enterprise as it shifts your mindset. So all of a sudden, you're no longer just focusing on, oh, I want to produce 3 collections in a year, or I want to design 4 collections in a year. All of a sudden, you're no longer just only thinking about, oh, I want to be on this runway, on that runway. You're no longer only thinking about, oh, I want to do this photo shoot, that photo shoot. You're now thinking about other things like, oh, if I'm going to be on this runway, what is the ROI from me being on the runway? What is it going to be? What would it require of me to be on the runway? And what is my ROI? Like, what am I getting back in terms of my numbers from being on the runway? These are things that sometimes we don't pay attention to. Again, like I said, we focus very much on the front facing one. If I'm releasing 3 collections in a year, yes, you're busting with creativity, with ideas, you have a story you want to tell. But if I'm releasing 3 collections in a year, how much of each collection am I selling? And the collections that I'm designing and releasing, is there a demand for it? Is there a demand for that collection, for that product? Or is it just based off my creativity? The moment you start to see your fashion business as a business, these are like questions that you find yourself asking, because now you're looking at it from the numbers perspective, you're looking at it from the enterprise perspective, you're thinking about what is going to cost you, what your ROI is going to, what your return on investment will be. You're thinking about sustainability, you're thinking about cash flow, right? A lot of designers just design collections over and over and over and over. And when I ask questions like, okay, why did you design this collection? It's usually from a place of passion, from expression, and those things are not bad. And this is a balance that I'm hoping that I'll be able to bring into this session. So I'm not saying that passion, creativity, talent, and those things are bad. They are not bad. In fact, they are things that will stand you out. But if they are not balanced with an understanding of data, of numbers, of demand and supply, and really seen as an enterprise, that passion is going to dry out at some point. So even when people design collections, and I ask sometimes, like, why are you designing this collection? The feedback I get is, it's fashion season, I wanted to design something, or I wanted to express myself, or it's a story I want to tell. And those things are important. But if you're designing a collection without paying attention to data meaning, what are people currently buying? What have people bought from you previously? What have been the feedback that people have, your customers have given to you when they bought from you? Which one of your goods are moving, the fastest? Which one is not moving as fast? What is the current season? Because people buy according to season. So if you're designing something that should fit, winter in summer, it's not going to do as well. Right. And again, this is also dependent on the region that you're in. Whether you're in Nigeria, you're in Kenya, you're in South Africa, there are different seasons. So if you're not designing to fit different seasons, if you're designing off your own passion, your own desire, and not off data, not off numbers, that collection is most likely to not do as well. And this is what happens when you start to have recurring themes of investing a lot in the business and not feeling like you're getting it back. Because one thing I will tell you for sure is that the fashion industry is one of the most vibrant industries right now, especially in the creative industry and even outside of the creative industry. People are always buying clothes. During COVID, a lot of data showed that a lot of people spent time shopping, which was interesting, right? Because you would assume that in COVID, people are they are not going to, but a lot of people spend time shopping. And the brands that were immediately able to use that data to create like loungewear, two-piece sets. It was at that time that a lot of loungewear and two-piece sets started to really trend. So a lot of brands that were able to take that data and produce off that data, they made the most of that COVID season. So people are always buying clothes. People will always buy clothes. People will always buy accessories, jewelries, all of these different things. So there's always a market for you, right? So if you're in a fashion business, you're running a fashion business, great, there's a market. But if you don't understand the operating systems, how the market work, how the market should work, if you've not created structure around your business, you're going to struggle. So I'm going to run us through some operating systems and some mindsets. So I've done like a disparity here: artistic mindset and entrepreneur mindset. And remember, one of the things I said is that one thing I'm doing with this session is I'm not saying I'm not against creativity or your artistic mindset or being expressive or being passionate. No, it's very important that you're able to retain that and manage that. But one thing I really want us to be able to achieve after today's session is that balance where it's you protect and preserve your artistic mindset, but you're also running with an entrepreneurial mindset, especially when you're a small business and you cannot afford to have, a COO or a business operating officer, even established businesses. Not everyone can afford to have, that form of variation in their business. So for you as a creative, as the founder, as the CEO, as the everything, you need to be able to balance this mindset, right? Where there are times that you're leaning towards your artistic side and there are times that you're leaning towards your entrepreneurial side. In fact, what I would say is focus on the entrepreneurial side first. Develop your framework, develop your structure, right? Develop what you think can work. And then off the boundaries of that, you then go into your artistic side. So for example, I know I couldn't really I'm not sure we did introductions. Like, I know that we put our names and our locations, but I don't know if how many of us here actually have fashion brands and all of that. And I'd love to use, the name of any of our brands. But let's say that, Ayango is a designer and the name of your brand is, let's say, the Ayango label, for example, and you're coming into a new year, you're designing your plan for the year. It's better to design your business strategy for the year first, to say, what are our numbers currently looking like, and what numbers do we want to achieve? Right? How many products did we sell last year? What were our best-selling products last year? And what do we want to do this year? It's better to design that structure and that framework first, the entrepreneurial mindset first. And when you've done that, it allows you now know that, okay, you know what? Of the numbers we want to do this year, we can release 2 collections this year. We can do 1 trade show this year in New York or in London because this is what we can afford. Okay, now you've done that foundation to say, okay, this is what we're able to invest in these activations, and this is what we're hoping to make back. And again, I use that word hoping very carefully, because I don't mean hoping like you just hope. I mean, off the data, off your numbers, this is what we're going to make back off this investment. So now you've sort of set a structure to say, okay, I'm releasing 2 collections, I'm doing 1 activation, I'm doing 1 trade show. Then you switch to your artistic mindset to say, okay, now that I've designed what our numbers and our business can look like, and we know what is selling, we know what people want, what can I design within these boundaries? Right? I hope this makes sense. But this is a framework I always recommend to fashion entrepreneurs and to people to use. Lean towards your entrepreneurial mindset first, create your financial and business structure, and then you lean towards your artistic mindset. So whatever you're creating or expressing with your artistic mindset is within the foundation or the structure that you've created as an entrepreneur. So I've highlighted 5 artistic mindsets and 5 entrepreneurial mindsets. The artistic mindsets, the first one is it expresses, and I think I've touched on this already. It focuses heavily on expression, on creativity, on inspiration, and all of that. While the entrepreneur solves, you're focusing more on solving problems. Again, like I said earlier, like, okay, what were people buying more last year? What was the feedback I was getting from my clients last year? I'm not just designing because I want to express myself, or I traveled to Bali. I was really inspired by the umbrellas, so now I'm going to design a collection of umbrellas and whatnot. No, that's what an artistic mindset will focus on. But as an entrepreneur, what you should focus on is solving. Like, what's the feedback that I'm getting? Or if you're on the call and you've not even started your business, you're just about to start your fashion business, or what is the biggest feedback you get from people? I know people who started their brand because it was really hard to every time people were getting married and they wanted to make like their bridal robes, the bridesmaid robe, it was hard to get it like immediately. You have to maybe go to a tailor, and she started a business off that, creating like bridesmaid robes, bridal robes, and that was because she had seen a problem, and that business is doing well because it's solving a problem. If you need your bridesmaid robe or your bridal robe in the next 24 hours, we have them readily available in silk, in satin, in all of these fabrics, and because again, these things the sizes are easily adjustable. It's for her, she started that business solving a problem, right? And you might even already have the business, but there's something that people are always saying to you. You see, when you're working with an entrepreneurial mindset, everything is data to you, everything is feedback to you, every single thing. So people, maybe your customers are buying from you, or people just say, oh, I really like this outfit, but I feel like I'm really looking for more comfortable, functional pieces. That is feedback for you. So when you're designing or you're creating, you're not just expressing something, you're also solving something. The best brands, or the best form of the best fashion brands, are brands that are able to express and solve problems at the same time, right? In fact, another brand that comes to mind is Banke Kuku. I remember watching a video. So for anyone who might not know her, Banke Kuku is a Nigerian-based luxury brand, and they do a lot of loungewear, silk, soft soft luxury pieces. And she started her brand in COVID, right? And the reason why she had started, she already had a background in fabric design for international brands and furniture and all of that. But during COVID, she started getting a lot of feedback from people about, a lot of people are were in the a lot of people were in the house, right? And they needed like easy things to wear. I think she had started the brand just before COVID happened. And then during COVID, a lot of people were in the house. They still wanted to have a semblance of style. They wanted to have a semblance of control over their life, right? Because COVID was happening. Nobody knew what the next step was. And she started creating luxury pajama wear and silk wear. She was solving something, but it was those pieces were very like colorful, it was still expressing a bit about creativity, but it was solving both, and the brand took off. Banka Coco was one of those brands that took off during COVID era. So that's an example of merging that artistic mindset and the entrepreneurial mindset. The second thing there, it says the artistic mindset creates what feels right. The entrepreneurial mindset creates what sells. I don't even think I need to spend too much time on this because I feel like I've been speaking about this already. So when you're creating or building your brand from an artistic mindset, you're focusing on, okay, this is what I feel like, I want to express. This is what feels great. This is, for me, this is my own idea. This is my own design. Or I think the skirts should have this. And those things are lovely. But if it's not selling, what is the essence of creating the brand? Except if you're building a fashion brand that is focused on artistic fashion, meaning you're not selling, you're creating for showcase and exhibition. That's the only time it works. But if you're creating a fashion brand that is a brand and that you want to sell, you're running it as a business, you cannot only create what feels right, you need to create what sells, right? Another part of the artistic mindset, it values originality, while the entrepreneurial mindset values repeatability. And I want to talk about this because this is also very important. When you're building or running from an artistic mindset, you're always asking yourself, what's the next new thing? What new thing should I create? What new collection should I do? What new design, right? But when you're thinking from an entrepreneurial mindset, you're thinking about staples. And this is one thing I always teach brands and recommend to brands, even the brands that I consult with, which is that as a fashion brand, you must have what we call staples. There are things that people will always buy, especially the things that you found to be your best sellers. You should always have your staples. It always sells. What I recommend or what you do is you can switch, colors, maybe fabric patterns, etc. But when you've hacked your star product or your key product or your star product, it's very important that you're creating a sense of consistency, because what that also does for you beyond your repeated sales is that it starts to create an identity for your brand, and position almost that there are certain designs that we see today and one person comes to mind, right? There are certain designs. Yeah, there's a brand in South Africa. I'm trying to remember the name of the brand, but the founder is I think his name is Imzuki Imbeni Imprintza. Yes, I was trying to remember Imprintza. Every time I see a product from Imprintza, I know that they are the one, because they work with the same type of print. Same thing with Tebe Magugu, for example. Tebe Magugu is also another fashion brand from South Africa, right? Where there's some sort of consistency either around the design, around the fabric. In Nigeria, for example, Banke Coco. There's so many brands I can mention in Nigeria where there's that sense of consistency and repeatability. I mean, Dye Lab. There's so many brands, and this is because they've hacked. This is what people like to buy, and create your staple products. In fact, if we take it global and talk about international brands, right? So for example, the Chanel, there's the classic Chanel flap, which has existed for years, and you can always still buy a classic Chanel flap, right? What happens is sometimes it comes in different colors, in different fabric type. It's like, again, take it to LVMH or MS, and all of the Birkin bag will always, the Kelly bag. There's no, oh, I did Kelly bag last year, and it did really well. This year let me do something else that is off point. So artistic mindset, you're always thinking, oh, what's the new thing? What should I do? Original. Entrepreneur mindset, you're thinking consistent cash flow. You're thinking consistent sales. You're thinking consistent imagery, right? If you've hacked your star product, one thing you want to do is make a staple out of it where you can repeat it. You're bringing it over and over and over. It can be in different colors and different fabric type, but you're creating a staple out of it. Especially when you've hacked a product that sells, right? It's very, very important. The artistic mindset seeks validation. The entrepreneurial mindset seeks viability. So an artistic mindset, you're focusing on people saying, oh my God, this is so lovely. Oh, did you design this? This is so perfect. Oh, this is that, that, that. But if that doesn't translate to viability meaning people are willing to buy it and, pay a token for it, and it's profitable, it's not translating into anything. The artistic mindset works when inspired. The entrepreneurial mindset works on schedule. I don't think this is something I need to spend so much emphasis on. I think it's pretty much clear. But a summary from this slide again is I want to go back to what I said initially, which is that there's nothing wrong with being artistic and being a creative, but you need to always be able to balance it with this other mindset on the right, which is you're asking yourself, like, what problem am I solving? I'm thinking, right, okay, is it functional? Is it comfortable? Is it luxury? Is it fast? Is it, you pay for it, you get it immediately? Is it stylish? Is it for plus size? All of these different things. You're not just thinking about, oh, I have this idea for an outfit. No, you're trying to match the ideas you have with the needs that exist in the ecosystem, right? Are you creating what feels right, or are you creating what sells? Are you valuing originality, and you're constantly inspired, and every time you have new ideas and your old collection and your new collection, there's no form of semblance or continuity, right? Or are you valuing repeatability, creating a sense of consistency, that people can almost constantly tell what to expect from you, and people are buying, and that's how you build a cult brand, right? People are buying into you. Are you focused on seeking validation or seeking viability? And then are you working when inspired, or you work on schedule? You need to be able to balance, all of this to really build a successful business. Okay, moving on. I want to highlight 3 fashion business operating system. I'd say that these 3 systems are very, very important to build a successful and a profitable fashion business, and to help you move from just being artistic to being entrepreneurial, to thinking success, to thinking sustainability, to thinking long term. The first one is the creative system. The second is the production system, and the third is the trade system. A lot of times we focus only on a bit of the first and then a bit of the second. A lot of times we don't even pay attention to the third. So we have the creative system, the production system, and the trade system. The creative system is where conversations around your design, your story, your identity is answered. This is where, in your creative system is where you're creating the frameworks, right, that guides how you design, that guides how you tell your stories, your brand identity, who you are as a brand, who you are as a creative, the story you want to tell, right? This is also where like your marketing comes in. This is where putting your brand forward, visibility, all of these different things come in. And a lot of times we focus on the design part in this creative system, but every other part of the creative system is also important, because I was recently watching or listening to a survey, and the person was speaking about how in the last year a lot of department stores in the US and in Canada were closing, and not just department stores, even some popular like online retailers have been closing. And one of the things that she was saying is that a lot of people now, even the HNIs and the people who buy luxury or purchase luxury, are no longer just looking to buy bland, repetitive, boring clothing or things that have zero identity or story. And that is true because a lot of consumers are now going straight to the brands to buy directly from the brands. A lot of people are now buying from like pop-ups, going to brands' websites, buying from brands that they feel like they can connect with, brands that have strong identity, strong story. So your creative system is not only about your design. Your creative system is not, it doesn't end when you've designed the collection or you've designed you've designed the product. Also, how you tell the story of the product matters. The identity behind your brand matters, and how you present that identity matters, because now people are buying into brands, people are buying into products that they feel a sense of connection with, that they feel like, you know what, this is who I'm trying to be. It's either it is a sense of immediate connectivity or it is aspirational. So it's either, oh my God, this is so me, or this is who I'm trying to be. These are like factors that people are now buying into. And this is not only a local factor or a regional factor, it's now a global factor. So one key system you want to pay attention to, where your fashion business operation is your creative system, not just in your design, but also how am I telling my story? You have your like social media platforms, your website, all of these different things. How are you telling your story? You've designed a collection and you're just posting it like new collection, come and buy. Great, but how are you telling your story? What is your identity, right? How are you putting out that identity? And is there some sort of consistency around these three layers? So I mean, the creative system, all of these systems, I would say, is an entire masterclass or framework inside them. But at the very basic foundation level, you need to highlight these three things and pay attention to them. And then you come to the production system, which is, I think this is the most known. Production system is talking about like your tailoring, your sourcing, your quality control. There also has to be a system for this. And I know that supply chain and logistics is one of the big problems that, we still have to tackle across the continent, where there are a lot of designers who can't continue certain designs because they can't get the fabrics anymore. And this is also why a lot of people have now resorted to designing their own fabrics and etc. But sourcing, there has to be a system around your sourcing. When do we source? If we're releasing 2 collections in a year and we're doing, let's say, 3 drops per collection, meaning the first time you release the collection, you produce 50 pieces of it. And you say, you know what, once the 50 pieces get sold, we're going to do another 50 pieces. If they get sold, we're going to do another 50 pieces. Once that final 50 pieces are sold, we're no longer producing this collection. There needs to be some sort of structure and system around it. And you design it off, number one, your capacity, but you also design it off the demand that you're supplying to. So what is your sourcing system? How frequently do you source? Where do you source from? Are you sourcing from local markets? Are you importing? What's that system around it? Are there timelines? Do you source? Oh, we source every quarter. We source twice in a year, right? Or you're just focusing on every time somebody says, oh, I need a dress, you're running to the market. It's not sustainable. And you can't build a strong enterprise out of that, right? So what is your sourcing system? Tailoring, again, this is important. I think this is pretty straightforward. This has to do with like your cutting, your joining, your sewing, all of that, pretty straightforward. The other one is quality control. And I found that a lot of brands don't pay attention to this, but actually now that Africa is playing on a more global scale and a lot of people are looking to the continent, but looking to engage and, buy from the continent, quality control is a very important thing. There's been a lot of feedback. Again, recently on Instagram, somebody had bought a top from a brand and I think they had bought the top in Nigeria, but the person had gone back to London where they live or so. And after the first wear, the emblem on the top has started to come out and the top was loosening, and they had done like an entire Instagram, for lack of a better word, dragging, right? And these are the challenges that we have. If we're going to operate at a large scale, if your business is going to operate at a large scale, if you want to continuously serve, a continuous, consistent consumer audience, quality control is something that you must pay attention to and you must act. And quality control starts from your sourcing. It's not only at your tailoring you do quality control. Quality control starts from your sourcing. So even the kind of fabrics that you're buying, there has to be quality control to ensure that the quality of the fabrics from the get-go is durable. So quality control does not start from when the tailor is already sewing it or they're already joining it. It starts from your sourcing. So quality control is something to pay very important attention to. And then there are other aspects of your production system, like your pattern drafting, things that allows for continuity of design. But I'll stop here for now. The final system I've highlighted is your trade systems. And this, we don't pay as much attention to it, which is how you're pricing your products, what your margins are, what your sales channels are. So as an artist, as an entrepreneur, as a founder, you cannot only focus on designing and tailoring. You also need to pay attention to your pricing. What are your margins? What are the industry margins, first of all? And then what are your margins? What are your margins for wholesale? What are your margins for retail? I'm currently working on a buying project, and I'm buying for a UK retailer who's launching soon, and they're buying they're buying products from a couple of designers that they're interested in. And a number of designers that were reached out to say, hey, we want to purchase 30 pieces, 50 pieces, 100 pieces of your product. A lot of them have, some people have come back to say, oh, we don't have a line sheet, or this is what we currently sell in our retail price. What would you recommend we sell in our wholesale price? You don't wait until you are at the point where you're getting wholesale orders before you start to do these margins, right? So even when your business, as you're starting, you need to be able to do your margins. You need to be able to do your margins to say, okay, if it's costing me $20 to make this outfit, what is an ideal margin to put on this product? Factoring other things like rent, like marketing, like your team, hiring, all of those different things. Because all of that cost needs to come off every single product you are selling, right? So if it's, for every product I'm selling, 2% of this sale is going into let's say electricity or power, right? You need to, when it comes to pricing, I'll say pricing is something that a lot of brands, creative brands or fashion brands don't pay attention to, but it's very important because I've seen a lot of scenarios and stories where, oh, we're doing a lot of sales, but in the grand scheme of things, there's no profit because the burnout rate is way higher than than the profit. So your pricing needs to be very detailed. When you're doing your pricing, you're doing your foundational costing, meaning at the very basic level, what is it costing you to make this product? And this means you're sourcing, like what's it costing you to get the product, logistics, tailoring, and then you then layer on that what your running costs are, right? So let's say, for example, in a year, it costs you, let's say, $50,000 to is your running cost, which covers your rent, electricity, your hiring, and all of that. You're going to have to break that 50,000. So if you say it's $50,000, and for you to be able to break even in a year, you need to sell 500 pieces, right? A portion of that $50,000 has to come out of the 500 pieces you are selling. So if you say, okay, you know what, I'm going to set the price for my pieces for I'm trying to do the math, say like $100 or something, and $20 out of this $100 is going into my running cost. And then the cost to make the outfit itself is another $20. So it means that we're making a profit of $60 before taxes, right? So your pricing has to be detailed like that. And again, this is just me. This is an analogy I'm giving you. Of course, you need to be able to interpret it in your own context, right? Because I know there are different countries. So in shilling, in naira, in rand, whatever context you find yourself in, but your pricing needs to be detailed. It cannot only be, okay, this is how much I bought the fabric, or this is how much I'm paying my tailors. Okay, let me just add 20% on it, right? You're not going to break even And at the end of the day, your numbers will not make sense. So your pricing and your margins. And then thirdly, your sales channel. Also, this is something we don't pay as much attention to. When we think about sales, we're only thinking about, oh, I'm going to post it on Instagram. I'm going to post it on my WhatsApp. But sales is more than that. And for every business, you need to ask yourself, I can't go deeply into it because it really should start from your business model, right? But you need to ask yourself because there are different sales channels for different business models. If you're doing a mass market business model, for example, meaning you're producing fashion items that you're selling to you're looking to sell to thousands of people. Maybe you're doing like t-shirts and round necks and bucket hats and face caps, or all of that, or basic tops, and it's a mass market. Your sales channels is different. You have to have multi-sales channel. Or if you're doing a more mid-level, mid-range business model where there's a particular audience you're catering to. It's a diversified, wide audience, but it's not every single person. Your sales channel also has to be able to translate to that audience you want to sell to. If you're doing a niche, okay, for example, you're doing like wedding dresses. It's very niche. It's only for brides, right? Your sales channel has to be designed to be able to serve that audience. And it's not only Instagram, there are different sales channels, there are offline sales channels, and there are online sales channels. Now we focus majorly on like online, but they are offline and they are online. And even online, it's not only your website and your owned channels. They are secondary channels and they are primary channels. Primary channels are channels that you own. Secondary channels are channels that you do not own. And when we think about online secondary channels, I'm talking about the e-commerce platforms, the e-retailers. There's so many other channels and ways that you can explore. But again, like I said, it has to stem from your business model, because whatever channel you are exploring, it has to fit the kind of business you are doing. So if you're doing a niche, very niche-based luxury bridal brand, you can't use a mass market sales channel for your business, right? If you're doing a niche-based luxury bridal brand, you can't just go to a random market and get a store in the market. You would not find your target audience there, and you won't break even. So again, your pricing, your margin, your sales channel, in fact, every single thing in this operating system, these three systems I've highlighted, every single thing here has to be fed into from your business model. And today is not a business model session. I'm sure you have like other sessions coming up that are quite exciting, right? But every single thing here has to be fed into from your business model. And your business model is really answering or asking the question of what kind of business are you running? What kind of customers do you want to serve? What kind of value are you bringing to the market? And it's off that you then start to design your creative system, your production system, and your trade system. Because there's a creative system for a type of business, right? If you're trying to target a luxury audience, there's a kind of design that appeals to them. There's a kind of identity that appeals to that audience. Same thing with production, with trade, all of these different systems. But these three key systems I've shared with you today are very important systems to pay attention to. If you're able to design some sort of framework around these three systems, it would create a structure for you in your business, and you are most likely to run a successful business than when you're just moving from an artistic, today, this is what I want to design. My tailor is making it. And then there's just random promotions. It's not curated, it's not organized, and it's not intentional. If you only build creativity, you're building fragility, right? And I think this is just what I was saying earlier, that if you're just focusing on expression, artistic, all of that, and you're not building a structure or a framework around it, you're building a system that is very fragile and is most likely to stretch out or fail after a period of time. Okay, so I want to highlight 5 mindset shifts. I hope everyone is still with me and I have not bored anybody yet. It's a lot of information, but again, you just need to pick 1 or 2 things that you can immediately start to apply. shift from expression to value creation, and I've spoken about this already, so I don't want to go too deep into it. But value creation means you're solving a wardrobe problem, you're designing for a specific buyer, you're pricing for sustainability. And this pricing for sustainability, again, going back to that conversation around your price margins, you're not just pricing because you want to sell. Oh, let me just take it. Someone comes and they want to buy and you just want to sell and they say, oh, give me 50% discount. And you say, yes, just take it. But it's not sustainable because you can't continue like that, right? So you're pricing for sustainability, you're designing for repeat purchase. Again, these are things that I've touched on earlier. I guess this is just breaking it down, right? So an artist is asking, oh, do you like it? And that is an important question to ask, but it does not end there. You also need to be able to ask, will you pay for it again? Is this something you can pay for? Right? You're moving from pieces to product strategy. Again, I feel like this is summarizing some of things I've shared. So artists, you're focusing only on collection. Oh, I need to design a collection. I need to release a collection. But as an entrepreneur, you're focusing on creating revenue engines, right? So your revenue engine has hero products. I mentioned this earlier. A lot of successful brands, global brands, regional brands, local brands, they've hacked this. This is something you need to hack. You're focusing on your hero product. You're focusing on your margin structure. You're focusing on reorder potential, meaning how many times is this something people will want to buy again? I went to a store, I think it was yesterday. I got a top for a shoot I was doing, and I really liked this top. But I was just saying to myself, you know what? I need to go back to buy like 3 or 4 more of this top. Those are the kind of products that you want to have, right? Because those products then become your sources of cash flow. And it's easy to get the data if you're paying attention. But a lot of times we don't streamline our data. We're just selling. We don't even know what we're selling. We don't know who's buying. We don't know why they are buying. Data is very, very important when you're running business, right? So what is reorder potential? What's the production feasibility? All of these different things. Move from talent to systems, right? Artists are focusing on just creating only beauty, but systems create some sort of consistency. And I've touched on 3 systems earlier: the trade system, the production system, the creative systems. So focus on systems like your production calendar, capacity planning, workflow documentation, standard sizing, all of these different things that start to create some sort of structure and consistency in your business. Because what then happens is if you're building for growth and building for skill, the moment that skill or growth happens, it becomes easy to repeat and continue, that format. And you also know what your breaking point is. And I should say that this is something that a lot of fashion businesses don't know. Because I personally have worked with, I know 1, 2, 3 successful brands who blew and sort of, started to enter the global market. They started to get loads of orders, but they didn't know when to say, hey, this is the maximum that we can deliver. Because sometimes when you get into that point where there's a continuous demand and your wholesalers are saying, oh, we need 500 of these products, we need 200 of these products, we need 1,000 of these products, there's that point where there's an overdrive. And, in chasing success and not sustainability, you're committing to deliveries and agreements that is not sustainable. Because at the end of the day, you think, oh, if I do 1,000 products, I'll probably make more money. But it's going to cost you like maybe more manpower, more resources. You're going to lose a bit of your originality if you've not built the system for it. So a part of even understanding your system is knowing what your capacity ends at. To say, you know what, we can give you 200 products consistently every 3 months, but we can't do 1,000. And we want to be able to do 1,000. We want to be able to hit those numbers. But if we stretch so much to do 1,000 now, we're going to crumble. This is a nemesis I've seen happen to a lot of brands that have blew up or have done, really well, either in global markets or just with their consumers, where they are not able to say, this is the number that we can deliver on. And at the end of the day, sustainability is lost and inevitably they've had to take a pause. And I think this is also a semblance of what is happening to one of the brands that I had seen that I was talking about earlier. The 4th mindset, shift from sales to trade, right? So where you're no longer just thinking of selling just as, oh, transaction, let one person come and buy from me. Or if only one person can buy from my website. No, you're now thinking about, okay, how can I create a structured market access? Okay, you know what? I'm going to have my Instagram. I'm going to have my website. I think I want to get stocks in one or two in-person retailers, right? Okay, what other platforms can I be on? So at the end of the day, you're having about 5 sales channel. 5 is no, at that point, it's no longer just sales, it's now trade. So at any given point, at the end of the month, you're receiving returns from multiple channels. This is also something that a lot of successful brands have hacked, where at the end of the month, you're receiving reports, sales reports from, retailer one, retailer two, your own website, e-commerce platforms that you're on. You're shifting from just thinking of, oh, I need to sell one, I need to sell two, to saying, you know what, how can I position myself for multi-selling and actual trade? And that doing that also starts to give you data for what is working, what channel is working more. Or are people coming into my shop to buy more from me than they're buying from the website? Or are we seeing more website sales than in-person sales? Or is the retailer in London selling more than I am selling, in Nairobi? And does that mean that, what we're designing fits more of the London market than it does the Nairobi market? All of you, once you move from just hoping that you will sell to actually creating structure and creating pathways. So even when you're doing your marketing is then defined by your trade structure, because you're doing your marketing and you can then direct people into the different channels that you've created. Or even the kind of marketing you do, is then directing people to the different channels that you've created. So there are different trade layers. There's direct to consumer, Instagram sales, website sales, there's wholesale. Like I mentioned, like the UK retailer that we're currently doing some work with, that's wholesale. So they are buying in bulk from people. There's some people who do consignments, meaning we're not going to buy it from you, but you send it to us. And the moment we sell, we'll send you your money and we'll take our own percentage. That is also one of the biggest format of trade within the region. Here, a lot of people do consignment for like retail stores and wholesale stores. There's corporate B2B, there's exports, and there's all of these different things. And finally, the fifth mindset shift is to move from founder-centered to business-centered. If everything in your business is depending on you, you don't own the business, you're doing a job. And one thing I would say to balance is that at different layers in your business will require different things, right? When you start, it might be founder-centered. But one thing you want to be able to do as you start to grow and evolve is to move it to business-centered, where you're creating systems for different things. And then you're bringing in people who are then taking up different layers of your business, bringing in people, technology, who's taking up different layers of the business, because you cannot sustainably run the business alone, right? So I think that this is pretty much what I want to share with us today. It's been a lot of information, but I think there's a lot to take out of it in terms of the baseline, from moving from just thinking as a maker, as an artistic person, as a creative, to start paying attention to, running your business as a business. You can say, you know what, I'm going to focus on these operating systems. Do I even have operating systems? Or it can be any of the mindsets. You can pick one and say, you know what, this is one thing I'm going to sort of take away from this and I'm going to start to implement. And then there are a couple of to-dos that I've put in this presentation. You can pick one of it. I mean, I personally don't believe that you should take up everything and do everything, because you might struggle or you end up not doing it. But you can pick one and say, you know what, this is the one thing I'm going to do. So for example, audit your product. I talked about, creating products that are repeated, that people want. You can currently audit your product and identify, okay, what is truly selling? What are people really buying? And what is my margin of this? Okay, there's this boo-boo. I know a brand that we used to work with, or we still work with in our network. And she is somebody who is very creative. She's always designing. Every time she's like, oh, I have, I go to a sketch pad sometimes, just so many creative, beautiful designs. But the brand was still struggling, because that's not really what makes for profitability. But then she had a product that she designed. In fact, two products, but she had one product that she designed that was doing so well. In fact, she was doing huge numbers. People were buying it was a boo-boo. People were buying it for trips, for things. That product, right, was a hero product. And even when we did like pop-ups, and I remember we were taking the products to South Africa, to New York, it was one of the products that was also really selling. People really liked it. And I remember I'd said, I'd recommended to say, you know what, stay on this product. Create a diversification around this product. I'm not sure that was implemented, right? So again, the brand then starts to struggle, because at the end of the day, the business is about the business. It's not only about your creativity, and sometimes you need to learn to put the creativity on the back burner and say, yes, I have multiple styles I want to release, but this is the one that is selling now. How can I make more out of this? Can I ask people, oh, you really like the boo-boo? Would you like it if it came with some pants, and if there was like a top and pants to it? I think one brand that got this right, especially where the boo-boo is, a brand called Cladini. They got it right with the boo-boo. They started creating different variations. They created pants, off it. I have the pants, right? So people started buying. They created top, like a t-shirt and pants, identify what sells, know your margin, and focus on it. At least in different seasons in your business, within windows of 1 year to 2 years, you would always have hero products that are strong products. In that season, stay on those products, create staples out of them. They become your consistent cash flow, right? And one thing about fashion and products is, once something is an hero product and people like it, the moment you start to make a buzz around it, it becomes a trend. More people will want to buy it. That's really how fashion works. A lot of people, it's very trend led. So once one, two, three, four, five people like something and you create a buzz around it, you are creating an opportunity for 100 more people to like it and buy it. So number one, I mean, any of the to-dos, any of these tasks, you can pick anyone, audit your product. Number two is introduce structure. Say, you know what, I'm going to choose one process and I'm going to document it. I'm going to standardize, whether it's my production, my creation, pick one of it, right? The third to do, clarify your trade paths, right? You don't even know. If I ask some people, where do you sell the most, you have to think about it. Some people come into my DM, or some sales on the website, or some of my friends and family. Clarify your trade path. Where are you currently selling the most? What channels do you want to sell with? Because there are a lot of channels that you've probably not even explored, that you're not paying as much attention to. There are brands that I know, a brand that, a lot of their sales, it's a jewelry brand based in it's an accessory brand rather. They make bags based in South Africa. And the bulk of their sales comes from corporates and hotels and hospitality, where they have their bags in those the mini stores that are in the hotels. So they do a lot of like corporates, they do a lot of hotels, and that's where they get more of their sales. Right. So you don't even know what like trade channels or trade paths would be open to you, because you're not exploring it. You're focusing only on Instagram. As an entrepreneur, one thing you need to be fine with doing is experimenting and investing in experimentation and research. So travel, go for a pop-up, go for a trade show, see what the market is saying, and let that, really define, especially if you really want to do your business on a large scale, and not on a small scale. Yes, so I think that is pretty much it. I've given us some tasks. I know that this slide will be shared with you also, so you can go back to it. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. I know that, for some things you might need to do a deep dive into them. There are a couple of materials that you can get. I think we might even have a couple of open source materials around like business model, business foundations, and those things that guide your business. But thank you very much for having me this afternoon. I'm going to take questions now. And yes, you can also find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, our website. Like I said, there's some of the things I've touched on here where we have open source resources and manuals that sort of do a deeper dive into some of those things. And then you can also follow us on Instagram. I know we do a lot of more industry business insight that can give you a bit more clarity with what you're doing, right? So let me come back to the Zoom screen. I couldn't even see chat. I couldn't see, sorry, I could only see my presentation. So I don't even know if they were like.
I'm not sure you've missed much because again,
Okay.
quiet. But I'm hoping that they're going to speak now. have questions. So please, if you have questions, feel free to drop in the chat box. I have one or two here that I just want to kick off with while we are waiting for more questions from the house. As much as possible, we want this class again to be really practical, and some of the questions again just working with founders and engaging them, especially those that are trying to transition from self-employed to entrepreneur, right? It's just thinking about sales. This trade you spoke about channels, right? It's a very fragmented space, the fashion space. Typically, you find that people start from sewing for their family and friends. They bring their fabric, right? And then they start to sew before they then transition into buying fabric and navigating an entire different world, ready to wear or sewing custom, made to wear, whatever name it is called today, right? So how does, again, from just your experience, how would you say one should navigate that space today? I've seen a number of people start with strong ads, digital ads on Instagram. I've seen some people start with low prices, and then months down the line, they increase the price, right? Once they've built a community. What do you think will work today? Because again, it's really a fragmented space. Anybody coming in day one, I'm still sewing in my house. I want to now build a brand. How will you say one should navigate it?
Okay, so I think that the navigation of that is also very dependent on the kind of brand that you're building. So for example, say you started with sewing for family and friends, and I know a couple of brands like this that have said, oh, they start with, oh, somebody brings a design, please can you make this for me? And they make it, right? And then at some point they're like, you know what, this is not what I want to do. I want to focus on ready to wear. I want to create my own designs and then put them out. So the first thing is you need to sort of define what part of the market you want to play in, because sewing for people when they bring in their own design is called bespoke. There are different angles in the industry. There's bespoke, there's ready to wear, there's made to order, there's bridal. So you need to define what part of the industry you want to serve, and what can help you define that can either be the traction you've gotten or where you feel like you are most skilled at. When you define what part of the industry you want to serve, it also then defines the kind of approach you make. So for example, you say, okay, you know what, I want to do ready to wear. I've made for people, but now I want to focus on ready to wear. The way to enter into the industry or to get into it from ready to wear is very from bespoke. So from ready to wear, for example, that model that you spoke about can work where it's like, you know what, I'm going to come online, I'm going to introduce my brand, I'm going to set up my website or a place where people can buy from me. I'm going to make my price highly discounted, right? Because now I'm asking people to trust me with their money and just buy and know that they will get something, they'll get what they've placed order for. So when you're doing ready to wear, one of the things you want to do is create low barriers for people to be able to experience your brand, either with doing discounts, doing collaborations, doing giveaways. It allows people experience your brand and sort of reduces that risk or that trust thing that people have for you. If you're doing bespoke, it's completely different. You know, when you want to break in with bespoke, you can, decide to do like consultations. I think bespoke also does really well with feedback and referrals, right? To say, oh, this person I've made before I became out, I already made my sister's graduation dress. Can I get her feedback? Can I show the craftsmanship of what I made? These are different ways that you can really get into the market. But I'll say the first thing is you really need to define what part of the market you want to serve, because how to get into the market, how to position yourself, all of those different things is very highly dependent on the kind of audience that you're serving or the kind of market that you're selling.
Okay, thank you for that. I think that really helps. And so again, as you're speaking, I have a follow-up question, right? Because if you're transitioning in that manner, you start to think about those systems you spoke about, the 3 circles, right? If you're just to pick the production side, right? And you think about sourcing. How, again, in today's world where we have China, we have Temu, Shein, how do we source best? Again, you can use Lagos as a case study or any other states in Nigeria, right? What's the best way to source that's effective, is efficient, and you can still make some margin in the early days?
Okay, so the best way for sourcing right now, that I know that a lot of brands use, even some of the big brands, is local sourcing, right? Which is the local markets. depending on the region where you're in, but I know in Kenya, in Nigeria, there's a lot of importation that happens. So there are a lot of importers in local markets that sell a lot of this fabric in large scale, right? So for example, in Lagos, I know Yaba Market is one of the biggest like fabric markets and all of that. Especially because you're just starting. You don't want to take up the burden of dealing with that sourcing yourself. So you don't take up the burden of trying to liaise with the manufacturers, the producers directly, except if you have large capital that allows you to do that. But if you don't and you're getting into the industry, the best thing to do is to work with the resellers, the people who are already in the market. The only thing is that it also limits the consistency of your fabrics and what you're able to source, because what they have in the market this week might be gone when you come back the next week. Second thing that I've seen a lot of brands starting to do is, especially here in Nigeria, and I think in South Africa, is that a lot of brands have started to pay the price or make the investment in creating their own fabrics. So meaning they are using like basic cotton, but then they give it to like fabric designers, fabric manufacturers. For example, in Lagos, a lot of people now do their own tie and dye. A lot of people now print their own designs on fabric. So what that does for them is it creates a sense of consistency where all they need is the plain cotton and they do their own imprint on that. But again, this is also a bit capital intensive. So again, it's very much dependent on the kind of brand you are and where you're currently positioned. One of the biggest ready-to-wear brands in Nigeria right now, Zephans and Co., when they started, was just going to the market to buy fabric, whatever is in the market, buy it and produce with it, right? But as they started to grow and evolve, they started engaging a lot more with the larger manufacturers and the people who are producing in large bulk. And even now, they now do a lot of their own fabric design. Right. So again, it's very much also dependent on where you are right now and what you're able to afford. But what I recommend is engage your local markets. There are always local fabric markets where you can source for fabrics, for zips, for buttons, and all of that. Except if you're doing a brand that is very heavy on craftsmanship, then you can design your own fabric, get your own buttons and all of those things, but of course at a cost. The only thing is that you get to control the value chain.
Okay. Okay. Very insightful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's see 2 questions. First one, how do you find the balance between being a creative and an entrepreneur in a way that neither suffers?
Okay, I like this question because I feel like this question comes up a lot. And the truth of what I would say is that there's no balance. And I don't mean that it's not attainable. What I mean is that there are times that you're going to have to be an entrepreneur and you're focused on being an entrepreneur, and there are times that you'll be a creative. If you remember when I was teaching, I'd shared that when you're designing your framework for the year, first of all, start as an entrepreneur, right? Design, okay, as an entrepreneur, what are my numbers? What numbers do I need to hit in a year? What do I need to achieve? How much do we need to make? What worked last year and what did not work? You need to, first of all, sit in your entrepreneurial boat. In fact, I personally believe that you need to largely sit in your entrepreneurial boat because once you're able to put that structure, get your numbers, get your direction, it becomes easier to create. A lot of creatives end up getting frustrated. Oh, I'm not selling, or I'm not doing, my numbers are not doing great, right? And even at the end of the day, it still affects your creativity, right? So if you're running your fashion business as a business, it means you're an entrepreneur primarily first. And the foundations of the boundaries that you build as an entrepreneur then helps you be a creative. So in different seasons, you're going to have to alternate. There are times that you're going to have to focus on being an entrepreneur. There's something called buying season. In buying season, you're not wearing boots of a creative. You're wearing boots of an entrepreneur because you're trying to sell to wholesalers, to retailers, to people. You're trying to sell your product, your brand. And then there are seasons that you can then, sort of, I call them winding down seasons, where you're hitting your target or you're about to sort of get into the market fully. You've designed your framework and you just want to take out time to create and design, right? One other thing I want to say is that as your brand starts to grow, the one of the first set of people you want to hire is any you want to hire somebody who has the strength in what you're lacking. So for example, if you feel like I'm more of an entrepreneur than a creative, and I'll say that for myself, for example, I feel like I'm more of a businesswoman than a creative, right? And when I do businesses, I do better in the business parts than the creative part. Not because I can't create, but my head is always calculating numbers and things and all of that, right? So on my team, for example, one of my most important roles right now is my content and creative associate, because there are things he's translating that I don't think I will be able to translate as much. I have it in my head, but because I'm focusing on other things in the business, he's translating it so much more better. But that content and creative associate, he cannot run the business. He cannot handle the business the way that I'm handling it, right? So vice versa, depending on where you are, you feel like I'm more of a creative, learn the entrepreneurial things, focus on being an entrepreneur. But, one of the first hires that you might want to get is a sales person, right, to support your creativity. So I try to I try to not say, oh, this is how you balance it, because he really alternates in different times and in different seasons. But what's the most important thing is that what you're running is a business. So you're primarily an entrepreneur before you're a creative. Okay. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yes, that helps. And you sort of touched on the next one, where the question is around hiring. So, right, employing workers to handle management structure, sales challenges. You run it all by themselves, or run it all by themselves step by step. Should the new fashion workers to handle management, sales, and challenges, or run it all by themselves?
So a new brand, I don't think a new brand should hire workers to handle management. When you're a new brand, you need to set the tone for your business. So again, which is why when I was responding to the first question, one thing I said was, if you're running a business, you're primarily an entrepreneur. Yes, you can be a creative, but you're primarily an entrepreneur. So if you're a new brand, don't hire people to handle management. You can hire people to do some other parts, other things, like maybe your social media, sales, but not management. I think that if you're running your business, you're a new brand, one of the first thing you want to do is set the tone for your business. Design your systems, design your brand guide, design, your brand values, all of the things that represent management, create maybe your advisory council, all of these different things. And you have to be the one in charge of it, because your employees cannot run the business like you want them to, especially when you're a new brand, because you've not set the tone, you've not set the culture, right? So you're not going to get the output that you want. Roles that I would say you can employ for at the start of your business, you can employ for sales, a sales associate. Their job is to support your sales. You're the one who's setting the targets, you're the one who's setting the tone for what sales should look like, but their job is to execute it. You can employ a social media manager, but you're the one setting the tone to say, you know what, this is who we are, this is our brand guide, this is how I want us to sound, this is how I want us to look. You have to set the tone for that management and that structure. But you can then employ people to become operators, to become executioners. But everything around the framework, around the vision, around the guideline, around supervision and management, because it's a new brand, it's something you have to stay on top of, right? And again, don't run it all by yourself. I think this answer, what I'm telling you, is be somewhere in the middle. Don't hire somebody and expect them to do your management and run everything. They might run it in the wrong direction. But if you can afford to hire an assistant, hire a salesperson, hire a content person, people that take off certain burden of operation away from you, definitely do it.
Okay. Thank you so much for that, Rhoda. This is the last question. And then I guess you can please add your closing remarks to it so that we can include, except there's any other one coming in, but I think this is the last. What should success look like in 90 days? I know you have shared with us what a 30-day to do should look like, right? What should success is relative, but again,
exactly what I was about to say.
Standpoint, right? What should it look like in 90
days? So I would say success is relative. And one of the things that I always recommend to brands to do when we're having like business model session, business foundation session is I always tell them to define their own success metrics. Because success metrics vary for different brands. For some brands, it might be visibility, right? For some brands, it might be sales. For some brands, it might even just be launching. The fact that we've launched and we've not closed in 90 days, right? So I think success is very dependent on the brand, the essence of the brand, why the brand exists. One thing I can say for sure is that at 90 days, right, the brand should already start to see some sort of feedback or semblance of why it was created, right? So if you say, oh, I created this brand to solve this problem, by 90 days, you should already have some sort of feedback or traction around, the problem that you've solved. Because it's really relative. I can't say, oh, you need to have made this number of sales. But what I can say is that by 90 days, you should have gotten some sort of validation of your product or of your brand, whether it's with the number of following you've hit publicly, maybe on your socials, or it's in the number of sales you've made and the feedback from the sales you've gotten, or it's in the number of returning customer that you've gotten in 90 days. There needs to be some sort of validation that you must have gotten from your product or from your business. And I would assume that this 90 days is 90 days after launch, after you've launched the product or the brand or the collection. So yes.
And it's a wrap. Thank you so much, Rhoda. Thank you for taking the time, sharing with us, and then answering our questions. Really, 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 really appreciate it. Again, you sort of hit the goal, not sort of this session. Just shifting that mindset. So once again, everything happens with the mind, right? Once you start to shift your mind towards long term, towards entrepreneurship, towards I want this to be sustainable, towards I want to end my retirement from this. I want to be able to send my children to school abroad from this, right? Once you start to it becomes doable. Although it takes small steps today, but it becomes doable in the long run. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Really, really appreciate it. And thank you for the questions. Those in the house, thank you for the questions. I appreciate it, much appreciated. Tomorrow we are on animation. So please join those that are animators looking to understand the industry, how to move from being a creative as well to thinking about it as a business, as a creative studio, animation studio, gaming studio, whatever it is, right? How to create. We have Dami Sholesi coming to join us for that. Dami is CEO of our own animation firm, has won a number of awards and is still doing great things, has a YouTube channel. And please join, same time, 4 o'clock Lagos time. Look forward to having you there. And then on Thursday, sorry, we have the visual arts and craft class with Dr. Aguonigho. Dr. Aguonigho is a visiting professor of arts. Is originally from Unilag and has a strong base there. He's an artist, visual artist himself, fine artist himself. Done a number of work. And because this class, again, when I sort of pitched it to him, he said, I should change the title from entrepreneur to artpreneur. So he's ready, he's pumped to sort of teach. He's a teacher already by profession. So he's pumped. It's a class you don't want to miss. And then the last we have, next week will be, I think, my session on budgeting, money matters, how to be investor ready for those that want to figure out this or have an idea of how to figure it out from the early on, even if you're not ready as a business. And then the last session is will happen on the 19th. In that session, we have 2 segments. In that session, we have a panel session where we have an investor, the creative space there. We have someone that has also led programs at British Council, helping us navigate those questions, how to get grants, how to pitch properly, just how to position yourself best. And also, we'll have a guest session where the guest speaker, we've got able to lock in Inka Iloris, topmost Nigerian designer, Nigerian-British designer, helped to design the AFCON 2025 Man of the Match trophy. So it's a session that you don't want to miss as well, because it will be the closing session. So without further ado, okay, there's the QR code, the link. Please sign up for those classes. And yeah, I think that's all. Ejiro, that's all, I believe. Thank you once again for on time today. Have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye.